So we'll just go through that. I'll do that on my own.
Okay.
Okay. Curt Roberts, it's good to have you here.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Good. Here in the time of the coronas.
Yes.
It's an interesting time for, I'm assuming, you can tell me more, an interesting time for venture capital.
No question. It's an interesting time for two reasons, I think. One is the companies we've already funded, many of them are going through sort of challenging times, right? Corona creates difficult circumstances for most companies, although some, I would say, are benefiting tremendously from Corona. You don't wish for circumstances like that, but it happens in some cases. It's a super interesting time for new investments, though. I think you can look back to the Great Recession and find some of the very most successful companies in the current environment were started in that time.
Yeah.
And so with a brand new fund, we are absolutely excited to be investing in new companies right now, and fundamentally believe that the worst of times sometimes create the best of companies. So that's our attitude.
I think so many people need to hear that message. And one thing I feel like I've been a broken record about in my past interviews is my hope to make 2020 or give 2020 a more optimistic view, in the sense that it very well could produce the most entrepreneurs we've ever seen.
I agree. Tough times, unfortunately, a lot of people have to kind of take a step back for reasons they don't control, right?
Yeah.
They have to take a step back and say, what am I going to do with my life? And for those that have been questioning whether starting a company makes sense for them, sometimes the circumstances are forced on you and you decide to make that choice. And maybe it was the best choice all the way along. And it took the environment to force that decision.
Yeah.
And, we just, again, we wouldn't wish this kind of suffering on anyone. It's a horrible time.
Yes.
But we really do believe a lot of great companies are going to be started during this period.
Yeah, we have such unique problems and challenges that, I mean, you could only postulate about before, but now that we're in the midst of them, especially anything revolving around human connection, people are starving for.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
It will be so fun a year from now to see what sorts of things come of it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But as someone who deals a lot with seeing maybe not half-baked ideas. I mean, people who come to you and want to be funded, they're probably at least 3/4 baked.
They're reasonably baked, yeah.
With good ideas, you and I chatted earlier, and you said you see 300 to 500 companies a year and fund 3 to 5% of those.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe more like 1%, honestly.
Okay.
It's a really low number. Yeah.
Cool. First, I want to call out, don't get down if you don't get funded.
That's exactly right.
Second, what do you look for? Especially when you try to keep a diverse portfolio as a venture capitalist?
So we look for a combination of factors. I think one is we're looking for an idea that is orders of magnitude better than the best alternative in the current world. There's almost no human problem that someone hasn't tried to tackle.
Yeah.
The problem is oftentimes the solutions that have been presented are just frankly not all that good. And you and I could probably sit here and think of 5 to 7 to 10 things in our current lives where we just say, geez, if somebody came up with something better, I would love to go to it, right? And so it's that someone who comes up with something better that we like to see. And our general attitude is not just a little bit better, but a lot better. And the reason it has to be a lot better is that for you or for me or for a company to change from the solution they're currently using to a problem, that's a painful decision to make.
Yeah.
It's hard. There are transition expenses and costs and friction and people and all that kind of stuff. And so, you have to be migrating to something you believe is fundamentally better. And so that's what we like to see, is something that's just like orders of magnitude better than anything currently available. That's one. Number two, we like to see what we call founder opportunity fit. And I don't know that that's a Kickstart phrase, but it's one that we like to use. What I mean by that is we want to see something unique about the people that are starting that company that says these people have a truly unfair advantage to tackle this, right?
Given current market fit, maybe partnership, what sorts of things qualify?
Well, usually what it means is it's something about their background that says they are more likely to win than probably anybody else trying this. Either because they've experienced the problem personally, or because they have relationships in that market that give them a head start, or because there's a skill set from what they previously did that immediately lends itself to success in that new business, right? We're looking for something unfair, right? Something that makes that founding team just like, hey, these are the people you want to bet on. Because it's very rare that we see someone come in with an idea that we haven't seen before.
Okay.
I'm just being honest about that.
Yeah.
When you see 300 to 500 companies a year, almost everybody's thought of everything, right? And so finding a team that you really feel is just in an unusually likely place to succeed is something that really matters to us. Because the people are ultimately going to make the most difference. I used to work with a guy who invested in a lot of startups back when I was investing just with my own money before I joined Kickstart. And he had a saying that stuck with me. He said something to me one time. We were talking about a company that was really struggling that he'd invested in. And he said, you know what? Every startup has 2 to 3 near-death experiences. And that's absolutely true. Every startup reaches the point where it's like 48 hours from shutting down. You know? And
we don't wait for the next deal. We're done.
I mean, it happens over and over and over again. And so you want to be backing the people that are in the best possible position to buck the odds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Those are a couple of ideas.
Okay. So if we're going to run with this optimistic view of 2020 and hope that for those who are currently unemployed or furloughed or got a pay cut or realizing that they want a little more control of their life and want to bring things in-house, right?
Yeah.
What sorts of things would you recommend they start noodling on to work on that path forward? Let's say they have a problem they want to solve.
Yes.
And they are equipped. They're a good fit, like you were saying, to solve that problem.
Yeah. Okay. Here are a few thoughts. First, I think you want to have people joining your cause that are going to fill out some important roles on your team. I had a company I looked at recently that, I mean, it was an amazing product. I mean, truly, I'm using the product. It was an amazing product. Extremely well done, very well engineered. It's a consumer product in this case. Super interesting founder. Everything looked great about it. The problem was that this person had nobody else on the team. And so we've just seen enough circumstances where every individual has a certain set of skills and none of us are indispensable, right? We're just not.
Yeah. No.
And so our attitude is you want to bet on a team. You don't want to bet on just one person. And so what I would say is, if you're going to start this journey, start it with someone, right? There's the old, I don't remember who came up with this proverb, but there's the old proverb that if you want to go somewhere fast, go alone. If you want, if you want to get somewhere successful, go together, right? And I think find co-founders, find people that complement your skill sets, that can fill some holes in your team and make you look more complete. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's one point that's really important. Number two, I would say, spend the least amount of time and the least amount of money possible getting something available that a customer can actually test and give you feedback on.
A prototype.
Yes. Everybody in this industry likes to talk about minimum viable products, right? It's a phrase that's so old that it's almost not worth repeating. But honestly, the idea behind it is absolutely right. It's like you may have the sense in your own mind of what you think a solution looks like. You don't really know if that's correct until you get somebody to pay you for it, right? So don't overthink that product. Get something simple out there, get feedback. Even if nobody's paying you yet, at least the party that's going to use the product is giving you feedback that you can then incorporate and put a version 2 out there, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that's critically important. I would say third, and this is something maybe that we put more emphasis on in Utah, kind of culturally, as opposed to the coasts, particularly Silicon Valley, maybe to some degree Boston, New York. We really like to see companies that are willing to bootstrap. We love founders that can get super scrappy, that don't like spending money, that don't substitute money for brains, right? That actually go out there and make stuff happen on shockingly small amounts of money. And the reason we like that is because those people are more likely to build real businesses, that in times of COVID or anything else that comes along that disrupts a company's trajectory, those companies have paying customers that like the product, that care about it, that are most likely going to carry them through the hard times. And if you're just based on hype,
yeah,
and I'm not trying to paint all Silicon Valley companies with a broad brush, but you'll see people that have got great resumes that have an interesting idea that'll raise $10 million, and they'll go out and blow that money and not have anything yet, right? Nobody's paying them for a product. They may have engagement and users and all this sort of stuff, but part of what we love about the culture here in Utah is that people want to build real things. And so the faster you can get to something that people are using and paying you for, the more you're going to learn, the better your product's going to become, and the more likely you are to use money effectively when you raise it.
Yeah. It's funny, two things. Recently I was introduced to someone running a nonprofit that I'm interested in helping out with. And I was talking to her about, what lends someone to be a better steward, owner of their time, of their things, of whatever. And she brought up the example of her brother, who very culturally isn't necessarily that person, but his frugality drives him to be creative about those things. And she's like, he's the most green person I know. He buys secondhand. He, all these different things simply because he's frugal.
Yeah.
Which I thought was fascinating. I never thought about that being a preceding factor to drive.
Yeah. Here's what I would tell you. One thing we've concluded, and I think this is after, we've been in business since 2008. So we're 12 years into this now?
Yeah.
Scarcity is a virtue.
Yes.
It absolutely is. Scarcity forces hard decisions, and hard decisions mean that you're going to focus on only those things that actually generate value for your customers. You will not waste your time on distractions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when we fund companies, it's kind of interesting because in some respects, we're not in the business of scarcity. We're in the business of actually putting money into a company to help it accomplish something. But one of the things we really focus on is making sure that what we're offering that company is enough to do something meaningful, but not too much. Because companies that get too much tend to spend too much.
Yeah.
And it's just a reality, right? And so we actually think, we think scarcity is a really valuable mentality on the part of founders. I had shortly after I started at Kickstart, one of the founders that we funded, and he's currently running a very, very successful company. He was doing events at the time that were supporting aspiring entrepreneurs, and I showed up at an event as an invited speaker, and he was the MC. And he pulled me aside after the event, and we had funded him, right? So he was someone who knew us really well. He said, "Hey, dude, I've got 3 pieces of advice for you that I want you to take seriously." I said, "Okay." And he went through 2 of those 3 pieces of advice, but the one that was most interesting to me is, hold on, Casey, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, all right. The one that was most interesting to me is he said, you should make it a requirement that no company can spend any of the money you invest for 45 days after the time they receive it. I'm like, really? I said, what's the reason for that?
I think I get where he's going.
Yeah, and I think his point was the whole mentality of scarcity is so valuable that you want somebody, even if the bank account is sitting there, to not rely on the bank account as a crutch.
Yes.
You know, and I just loved that thought process. I think it's a really valuable way of thinking about running a startup.
Well, and how valuable is that now? I mean, the first company I worked for out of college, oftentimes in company meetings, they would talk about how they had money in the bank. And as a young professional, I was like, why are we mentioning this so often? I mean, that's great. That's cool. Pay me more.
Yeah.
And now I'm just like, oh my gosh, how valuable is it that companies running that way, once you do get to a larger scale, or even you're still small, 3 or 4 employees, and you have money in the bank, you have the ability to secure yourself against times like we're seeing right now, where then, as opposed to having to decrease your employees or whatever it may be, you can then just pivot to, I think of the story of, I forget what the Swiss Army knife company was, but due to 9/11, they totally pivoted to starting to create other things because they knew that main product was not going to be able to be carried or utilized the way it usually was going to be.
So I used to carry one of those with me in my backpack all the time. You can't take it on planes anymore.
No.
Right? So sales are going to drop through the floor. That's exactly right. I think the company is called Victorinox. It's a Swiss company.
Thank you. Yes.
Yep.
But by having that cushion, right, you can then in slow times maybe reassess and be like, okay, this is what we have been established on, but we value progression more than we value stability.
Yeah.
Which is an important thing that I think young entrepreneurs really understand, because they're so hungry. But then once you get established, you're like, this is what we do. And you kind of fall away from that.
That's right.
Okay, well, let's say you have the right person in front of you. Okay. They're suited for the job.
Yep.
You fund them.
Yep.
You freeze their money for 45 days.
Which we don't do, but it was a good idea.
What are some of these next steps that entrepreneurs are taking in those stages as they're establishing themselves as a more solid company?
So here's what I would say is the best companies, and we look for this in the pitches, and then ultimately, you know, after we invest, and in most cases we're joining a board, and so we're actually getting involved.
Yeah.
We're looking for the company to use those resources in a way that actually generate revenue. And there are probably 3 places where those monies go that make the most difference from our perspective. One is in the product itself, right? Oftentimes the product that's been developed to the point where the company raises money is relatively simplistic. It may be buggy. there are things that are great about it. There are things that are still significant problems. And so we'll always ask the company about how you're going to use the money. And it's always a good sign to us when we see some acknowledgement that a decent percentage of that funding should be used to make a better product. Okay, so that's number one. Number two are two things related to to revenue generation, and one is sales, one is marketing. Oftentimes we don't particularly care when somebody comes in and pitches us if the founder and CEO of a company is either a product person, an engineering person, a salesperson. Here's what we do believe is that in every startup, there have to be two executives that are full-time. One is somebody who knows how to build what the company's building, and the other is somebody who knows how to sell what the company is building. And we don't care which one's a CEO, doesn't matter. CEO can be a technical person, CEO can be a salesperson, we don't care. But those two boxes have to be checked. And virtually everything else at the really early stages can be outsourced. Or it can be hired at a more junior level. But seeing that a good percentage of the resources are going against revenue generation, either marketing or sales, are things we want to see as well. We always hate it when we see a pitch where somebody comes in and says, okay, I'm going to raise $1.5 million and 40% of it is going to go to general administrative expense. We're like, eek.
Why?
You're going to rent an expensive office and, no,
Yeah.
That's not what we want to see, right? So if the funds are going to be used toward a better product, a better customer experience, and sales and marketing, that's what we want to see, and that's where we focus our time after we invest for the first several months that come after that time.
Okay. A slight pivot, but how do you go about making sure that you fund not only diverse ideas, but diverse founders across different demographics, race, gender?
Yeah. This is tricky. So diverse ideas, so far at least, hasn't been a problem for us. And maybe this is just that we've been in business for 12 years. And so virtually anybody who's raising money that is possibly qualified for venture funding tends to find a way to make it in our door. And so we don't think there are a lot of opportunities that are good applicants for venture funding that we don't ever see, right? Now, we may miss some because we make the wrong decision, but there are a few cases in which we don't at least have an opportunity to take a look and meet with the founder and exercise some judgment about it. Diversity in the founding team, this is a significantly harder point. And I would say a lot of this has to do with Utah, honestly.
Okay.
Utah's a weird place, right?
Yeah.
We're focused here, although I would say we have a geographic focus that goes outside of Utah as well, including the Denver, Boulder, Colorado area, Arizona, New Mexico, and a little bit in the San Diego, California area. I'm on 2 boards in Colorado. 3 of the 4 companies we have funded in Colorado, and it's about to become a 4th because we're in the process of preparing for an investment, are founded by women. 21%, I think, is the number of the companies we have funded since the time we started. So between funds 1 all the way through the early stages of fund 5 are companies that are founded by women. I'm not saying that to say that's a great number. Right. It's not a great number. But I would say of the pitches we see, so of the people that come in our door and actually pitch ideas, it's probably less than 5% that are founded by women. I would love for us.
That means that women are great idea havers and executors then, if they
no question. Yeah, here's what I would say. And, I always hesitate to stereotype because I think any stereotype is wrong, right?
Yeah.
They're all wrong. but if we could look at patterns, I would say here are the patterns we see. Generally speaking, women founders are more scrappy with resources.
Interesting.
That's
cool.
generally a pattern. I would say women founders are more attentive, has generally been our perception, to the building out of a balanced team. Okay, to not hiring people that are just like them.
Yeah.
Right. It's so easy, and I think we all fall into this trap. It doesn't matter what our background is, gender, it doesn't matter. You know, we tend to affiliate with and feel most comfortable with people that are like us, right?
Yeah.
And we generally see, I would say, that women founders are more comfortable with hiring against strength that are different than the strengths the founder has, right? They're not as I guess our general sense is they're not as threatened by hiring for significant strength that may in other cases be threatening to the founder, right? That may feel like, hey, I'm hiring somebody that's actually better than me. We don't tend to see that problem as much with women founders. In fact, I was on the phone right before I got on this call with you with a candidate for the CFO candidate for a company that I'm on the board of. That's the CEO is a woman. She started the company. The vast majority of the executive team are women. And as I was talking to this person, I've been on this board for 3 years now. I was talking to this person. I'm thinking, wow, this person is actually way better than the CEO in 2 or 3 different areas. Kudos to the CEO that she actually doesn't care about that, right? That she wants that kind of strength on her team.
Yeah.
And so those are just a couple of thoughts, I guess, that we would say that cause us to feel like, you know, women-run companies. We would love to see more of them. We want to see more in the door. Obviously, we fund a lot more than we see, proportionally. And that's not because we have any, you know, necessary intent. And maybe this is an admission that you know, that is not 100% good. It's not because we're intending to be diverse in our funding. It's because they're the best companies, right?
I think that is
so we just want to see more of them.
Yes.
Honestly, we just want to see more.
Well, then, so what advice do you have to people who are different than, and you can tell me what the typical, and again, we're relying on stereotypes here, but what the typical venture capitalist funder is like? What would you say to people who are very much not like them? How to
here's what I would say. I don't think there's any reason to focus on that as either an advantage or a disadvantage. I mean, you could look up every venture capital fund in Utah: Kickstart, Album, Epic, Mercado, Signal Peak Ventures. Who am I missing?
Sorensen,
Peterson. What are you going to see? A bunch of white dudes.
Exactly.
Right? That's what you're going to see. And so I would say you honestly can't let that be a barrier. You have to come in the room, have confidence in your idea, know why you're raising money, how you're going to use the money. If you do that, you're going to stand out. It doesn't matter what your background is, what your gender is, ethnic background, sexual orientation. It does not matter. I wish there was more diversity in venture capital in Utah, and we're actually working to solve that on our end to whatever extent we can. And you know, there are some things we have in the works. I think they're going to address that, but we need more of that. But at the same time, I would say don't let the composition of the funding environment intimidate you.
Perfect.
It shouldn't. If you have a great idea and you're passionate about it, you have a fundamental reason why you're pursuing it, you've done the things you and I have talked about already, you're going to get funded because you're going to stand out.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. You drove the point home. And I asked that because I just think of myself being in that position and getting jittery.
Yeah, and honestly, I think there's reason, there's good research. There was a woman on our team here at Kickstart. Her name was Mina Wong, and we hired her directly out of undergraduate school. She was a super early undergrad, like accelerated, graduated early from high school, wicked smart, bioengineering major out of University of Utah. Joined us at like age 20. Okay, so and she and I used to talk a lot about her experience being in this business, and she's now actually in one of our portfolio companies. But she and I talked about her experience in this business, and she said, one of the things I've read in all the research about women in a business environment is, men are comfortable speaking their mind, significantly more comfortable speaking their mind, even if their ideas are stupid. Women for some reason, in many cases, all the objective research has said this, are less comfortable expressing significant confidence if they've got self-doubt about what the idea is. And so what I used to do with Mina, and I do this with the rest of our team here at Kickstart now, is just say, look, if you've got an opinion, say it. When I started in my career, you and I talked about this before, I was at McKinsey. The partner that managed me, her name was Nalini Srikumar, and she was a first or a second year partner at McKinsey. And I think I was 6 months into my career there. She and I were on an engagement together. She was the partner on the engagement. We just finished a team meeting, and we left this conference room. And she said, hey, Curt, I want to talk to you for a minute. We went into her office. I said, okay, what's up? She said, look, I know you have things to say. You're not saying them. Open your mouth. Right? And I thought, oh, okay. So even if I think what I have to say is stupid, I should just say it. And I think what you find when you start doing that is that a lot of the things you have to say are not that stupid. And you're probably thinking of things that other people aren't. And so that lesson from her to me was really important. And I guess I would say that that's the case. I would apply that to anyone else.
Yeah.
As well.
Okay. Well, with that, do you want to share your 3 takeaways?
Happy to.
Yes.
I got my 3 takeaways. Okay. Number 1, I would say have a why. Okay.
Definitely.
And this is what I mean by that. I have an attitude. Hey, there's your girl.
Yeah, Daddy. So we're playing tag.
It's really important to have a why. And this is what I mean. There are 2 categories of entrepreneurs. I oversimplify the world, but so take this for what it's worth. There's one category of entrepreneurs that I would say are characterized by the following. They want to be entrepreneurs. There may be 4 or 5 or 3 or even 2 really cool ideas they think they might pursue. They choose one, and that's the one they go after. Okay. There's another category of entrepreneurs that are people that ultimately have this incredibly irrational and deep and abiding passion for the problem they're trying to solve. And they literally cannot imagine themselves doing anything else. I like to fund the latter, not the former. Okay?
Yeah, I like to see that whatever it is they're pursuing gives them energy, keeps them up at night in a good way, because those cogs and wheels are just moving and grooving all the time. And they're
I'll tell you, there are a lot of people that have great work ethic, that are very tenacious, that will stick through difficult challenges. There's a material difference between that kind of a person, which is a given, and the type of a person that defines themselves by fixing a particular problem. And that difference is not trivial. Let me give you an example. So there's a person who started a company named Simple Citizen. Don't know if you've heard of the company. His name is Sam Stoddard. Okay. Simple Citizen, the easiest way to think of Simple Citizen is it's TurboTax for citizenship. Okay. You take a very complex process that's got a lot of forms involved, a lot of data fields. It's very confusing, a lot of legalese, and you put it into a nice, simple method to basically solve something that otherwise would cost you thousands of dollars for hundreds of dollars and get the same outcome.
Yeah.
Let me tell you why I like Sam Stoddard. So Sam was a BYU student. I don't care about that. But because I'm not a BYU student.
Yep.
But Sam got married in his junior year at BYU to a woman from Korea. Okay. So she was on a student visa in the US. Once they were married, she needed permanent resident status. So he had to go through the process of applying for that with her.
Saw what a headache
it was. Horrible. Okay. So let me tell you why I love Sam. So Sam wants to solve that problem because it's personal, right? It's personal.
Yeah.
I believe Sam's going to solve that problem. Sam has to be smart enough. He has to have the capability for it. He has to have a great team that backs him, all that stuff, right? But I know that Sam defines himself by that problem. Okay, yeah. So that's characteristic number one. Number two is, I would say, make sure that you're grounded in a need and not an idea. Okay? You may have gone through this experience. I know I have. I've had times, when I'm out buying a product or buying a service, and I just think, this is dumb. There's a better way to do this. And I know what the better way would be. And here's what I would do, right? And I just think, man, I should start a company about that. And in fact, sometimes my wife and I will have conversations about this, and she'll say, you should start a company around that. Here's the problem. I have leapt all the way from problem to solution without necessarily knowing if the solution is actually better. I know there's a problem, okay? But I've gone all the way to an idea about how to solve that problem. I've not tested that with anybody. I've not gone to a customer and said, okay, if we went from A to B, would this help, right? And so I think it's one thing to identify a problem. It's another thing entirely to conclude that a particular solution will solve it and that somebody will pay for that solution. And so I feel much better about founders that are grounded in the problem than grounded on their particular idea about how to solve it, because their idea is likely to be wrong.
Right.
It may only be wrong by 10%. In other cases, it'll be wrong by 90%, right? But if you're grounded in the problem and not the solution, then you'll let go of your preconceptions about how to solve it. Okay.
Yeah. So and it also is what keeps you around.
Yeah.
Because then you're tied to the problem and not the solution, which means that, like, as years go by, as you establish, kind of like the Swiss Army knife.
That's right.
You're not emotionally attached to the point where your identity is tied to this solution.
Yeah, it is so easy to get emotionally attached to the solution.
Yes.
And the solution is not the point. The point is there's a problem. You're trying to solve that problem. If your solution is wrong, let it go. Right? And find the solution that works.
Yeah.
So that's the second one. The third one you and I have already talked about, which is, don't strive for perfection first. And this is a hard one for me to admit to because I am a complete perfectionist. I love for every I to be dotted and every T to be crossed, and it just kills me for something not to be completely polished. The reality is a lot of the things I might do to polish that product could be completely off target relative to what a customer wants to pay for. And so you are far better off creating something simple, testing it, getting feedback, changing it. The perfection can come later.
Yeah.
Don't go for perfection first. Great can be the enemy of good. And you've just got to go for something that somebody engages with and likes and will give you feedback on, and then you'll learn how to change it over time.
Yeah, 100%. Some of my academic crushes are, oh my gosh, I'm blanking. Freakonomics. Steven, they're both Stevens.
Steve Dubner and Steve
Pinkner.
Oh shoot!
I know, right?
I know who you're talking about because I listen to their podcast all the time.
Yeah, but they talk a lot about reverting back to thinking like a child.
Yes.
And you even look at like magic, and magic can be really simple. Children are way more likely to spot how a trick was done than adults.
Yeah.
And
no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, Curt, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much. I hope a lot of
You're
these
very welcome.
Inspire people to chase their problems, not necessarily their ideas, and surprise us with where 2020 takes us. So thank you again.
Happy to do it, Casey. Thank you.